name is Shelly with New Mother Caregiving, and today I am going to show you how to make homemade bone broth. My Pakistani mother-in-law taught me her bone broth recipe over 30 years ago, and since then I have made thousands of batches of bone broth. Bone broth has been used by cultures all over the world for its medicinal purposes. It is one of the great superpower foods. It is nutritionally dense, it is easy to digest, and it will strengthen your immune system, it will support wound healing. Bone broth will just improve your overall health. I use my homemade bone broth recipe as the base for all the soups and stews I use to feed postpartum mothers those first 40 days after birth. So I am going to show you today two different kinds of broth, chicken and beef. I'm also going to show you two different flavors. We're going to do classic American and Ayurvedic curry flavored. And I'm also going to show you two methods for cooking bone broth. One is in the Instant Pot, which is a pressure cooker, and the other method is on the stovetop in a stock pot. The first thing we need are bones. Bones can be really hard to track down at the grocery store. So I'm gonna take you to the grocery store and we're gonna buy our bones. Let's go.
So I go to the health food store and I get my bones here in the freezer section. Wherever you see like frozen bone broth, usually my butcher puts them in this section. If you don't see them in this section, just ask the health food store butcher. You can also go to a butcher and get your bones there too. So here, there's organic backs and necks. Here's the femur bones. So there you go. There's the bones.
Let's go over all of the ingredients you'll need to make bone broth, both classic American and Ayurvedic style bone broth. So for classic American, you will use an onion, you'll use a whole head of garlic, celery, carrots, some fresh herbs. If you have rosemary or other fresh herbs in your garden, it's great to use. Some dried thyme, oregano, dried basil, some marjoram, some black peppercorns, and some bay leaves. These are all the things you'll need for the classic American. If you want to make the Ayurvedic curry flavored broth, you'll use an onion, you'll use carrots, and you'll use ginger, as well as garlic. But you won't use these herbs. Instead, you'll use turmeric, coriander seeds, and cumin seeds. So those are the flavorings that you'll use to make your broth taste delicious. If you're making beef broth, you will use these femur bones that have a nice marrow inside, really nutritious. And if you're making beef broth, a little bit of apple cider vinegar helps to draw those minerals out of those bones. If you're making chicken broth, then you will need chicken feet, which I'll show you a little bit later in the video. You will also need chicken bones. And if you can't find chicken bones, I'm also going to show you how you can take a whole chicken and cut it up and use the bones from this. So now that we have an overview of the ingredients, let's go over the kitchen equipment you'll need to make bone broth. You really don't need that much. You need a potato masher, you need a wire mesh strainer, so a fine mesh strainer. You need two good-sized bowls. Glass bowls are better than plastic because you will be pouring hot broth. This is the Instant Pot. I use a 8-quart Instant Pot. So if you are using a 6-quart or smaller than 8-quart, you're going to want to adjust the recipe. And then if you're doing it on the stove, you're going to want a big stock pot. This is a 12-quart stock pot. Then after the broth is strained, you're going to need to put it in something. And so I like to use either these silicone bags because they're really nice for storing them in the freezer. They have these little slide-on sealing things. They will not leak. Gallon-sized Ziploc bags, doubled up with a Sharpie written on the front. This is a great way to store your bone broth in the freezer. Now we have all the ingredients, so it's time to start cooking. This pot, the Instant Pot, will be the classic American chicken bone broth, and the stock pot will be the Ayurvedic curry beef bone broth. So we'll start with the Instant Pot, the pressure cooker. The first thing you do is you take your bones. So these are the necks and the backs, and these go straight into the Instant Pot, frozen. You don't have to defrost them. Necks and backs have a lot of collagen and a lot of the good fats in there. Okay, and then these are the chicken feet. So when I first started making bone broth, this really grossed me out. They are little chicken feet, but these are really great to add to your bone broth because they are full of collagen, and they really give your bone broth that jelly kind of consistency. So I put about 10 to 15 chicken feet in each batch I make. You will want to have 2 carrots. So I always peel my carrots because the peel tends to impart a little bit of bitterness in the broth, and you just have to give it a quick chop and put it in. You don't have to dice it or anything. You just quick peel and just a quick chop, throw it in. For classic American, I always put in 2 stalks of celery, quick chop, 1 whole head of garlic, cut it in half and just throw it in. You don't even have to worry about the peel. And 1 onion. So I like to use the yellow onion, and I like to keep the onion peel on. I just cut it in half and throw it in. So let's go ahead and pour in the water. My Instant Pot, I fill it to the top, and actually I tend to overfill it. This will be about 16 cups of water. I usually end up doing more like 18 to 20 cups of water because it does reduce down. Okay, so once I put the water in the Instant Pot, then I put all the herbs in. So I've got my bay leaves, a tablespoon of oregano, about a tablespoon of basil, same thing, tablespoon of marjoram, and tablespoon of thyme, and then, maybe like a teaspoon and a half of black peppercorns. Since I always happen to have a lot of fresh rosemary, I just use fresh rosemary, so any fresh herbs you have is great. Okay, a very special ingredient that I forgot to mention earlier is seaweed. I always put a little piece of kombu seaweed or wakame. I like kombu, it has a little less fish flavor, but this is packed with iodine. Really, really good for the postpartum moms. So I put that in, and everything is ready now. You don't need to add apple cider vinegar to the chicken broth because in a pressure cooker, those bones are gonna get disintegrated. They're gonna just fall apart and be crumbly. So you don't need to use apple cider vinegar to draw out anything because there's nothing to draw out. The bones are just gonna crumble into nothingness. You don't wanna add salt while you're cooking. We're gonna add the salt at the very end. So on my Instant Pot, all you do is push pressure cook, and we're going to cook it on high pressure for 1 hour. I'm going to turn off the keep warm, and that's it. And now I'm going to show you how to do the Ayurvedic curry beef broth in the stock pot for the stove. All right, so we have our beef femur bones. Look at this. These are so good for the mothers. This is all bone marrow. Really high in iron and protein and so many nutrients and minerals and vitamins for postpartum mothers to help them heal, especially if they had a hemorrhage. You know, we just need extra iron. And so the beef broth is really, really good. So I use about 2.5 to 3 pounds of bones per batch. And then of course, we're gonna put all of our lovely chicken feet. It gives this a lot more collagen. And then we're gonna add onion. Like I said, I keep the onion peel on because it actually kind of gives the broth a nice caramely color. Take the whole garlic head, No need to even peel it, just throw it in. And we have our kombu seaweed for that extra iodine. Again, I'm gonna put 2 peeled carrots. Bone broth is the absolute best first food for a postpartum mother. I give this to my clients immediately after they give birth, because when you give birth, your digestion shuts down and it slows down so that your body can divert all the energy to birthing a baby. So a lot of moms are not hungry in labor, but after they give birth, they can be very hungry, and sometimes they're not hungry. Either way, the bone broth helps to restore the digestive system. It's got amino acids, proline and glycine, which are incredible for healing the gut, for helping to revitalize the gut lining and the nerves in the gut. So these amino acids are so helpful, not only to help restore their digestive system so they can absorb nutrients from the food that they're eating, but it soothes the nerves. So proline and glycine particularly soothe the nerves. Humans have more nerve endings in their gut than any other part of their body. So if you're feeling really frazzled, if you drink a mug of bone broth, those amino acids are gonna go into your gut and they're gonna soothe those nerves. Postpartum mothers need that. Okay, so we're doing the Ayurvedic flavorings, right? So I actually don't add celery because the celery is more for a classic American taste. So instead, we're gonna go for some ginger. So ginger is great, okay, because just talking about digestion, the ginger actually helps to stimulate the digestion. And it's really important for her to feel hungry. It's important for her digestion to start functioning again, because when she eats food, she needs to have an active digestive system in order to extract the nutrients from the food. So it's really great to put this ginger in there for her digestive system. Bone broth in itself, the glycine and the proline and the amino acids, the minerals, and the vitamins help to boost the immune system, so to keep her healthy and strong when she's in a kind of a weakened, very fragile state. The other thing about bone broth that is unsurpassable with other, superfoods like vegetables and things is that it has collagen. Collagen is so important for tissue repair. So if a mother gives birth, she perhaps, has a vaginal tear or a cesarean scar. That scar is made up of collagen, and collagen is what helps those tissues come back together. So when we give her collagen in her body, it's helping her body to produce those collagen fibers. Collagen also helps with the joints, so that her muscles get really stretched out, her tendons, her ligaments, those pelvic bones open to let the baby pass through. And so the collagen in the bone broth actually really helps her ligaments and tissues to, those bones to move back into place. It's really important that moms drink bone broth every day. It's part of my 40-day protocol with feeding postpartum mothers. So now that the bones and the garlic and the vegetables and the ginger are in the pot, let's add the water, minimum of 16 cups. It's going to boil down, and you can always add more water when it boils down. Once the water's in, I like to put the spices in last. So we are going to add our turmeric. I use about less than a tablespoon of turmeric. So that's gonna have the anti-inflammatory properties, which is so helpful for the postpartum moms after birth. A lot of times there's a lot of swelling involved. And then about a tablespoon of cumin seeds. Cumin seeds also helpful for digestion as well. Coriander seeds, good for digestion, makes it taste great. And then we add about maybe 2 teaspoons of the black peppercorns. This is also a digestive stimulator, but it also helps us to assimilate the turmeric. And don't forget to add about a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar to the beef broth. And we're gonna put it on the stove. We're gonna bring it to like a kind of a low boil, and then we're gonna turn it down and just let it really gently simmer for a minimum of 24 hours. More like 48 hours is about a good time to cook on the stove. Something really important about cooking on the stove is that I open the lid after every 3 or 4 hours, and I mash it with a potato masher, and I'll show you that later in the video. Okay, let's put it on the stove. So back in the early 90s when I was learning how to make bone broth, you couldn't just go to the grocery store or the health food store and buy bones. So my mother-in-law taught me that you can take a whole chicken and you can cut it up and use the carcass for bone broth. So I'm going to show you how to do that if you can't find bones already cut up in your local grocery store or health food store or the butcher. So first thing is to take off the skin, and I just start cutting down the middle like this. And you kind of cut the skin away from the breast, and then you just kind of crack open the leg right here. Let's see, there's a little connective tissue. We're gonna cut that. And then you can give this leg a little pop, and it should kind of pop open right here. And you can start cutting in between the joint of the leg and the back. See how that comes off? And then you can just pull this is the leg and the thigh. You just pull that off, and we'll do the same thing on the other side. Sometimes your hands can get kind of slippery, so it helps to grab a paper towel or a cloth. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna cut right in between the leg and the thigh. So now we have the leg and the thigh. So I'd like to keep the meat to make some chicken noodle soup or something. So I'm gonna cut the meat off the bone. I'm gonna put it in a little pile so I can remember, use it, I can put it in the freezer. And now we have our mostly just bone and of course the cartilage. And then I take a heavier knife and I just give it a couple whacks to help break open the insides and put it in a bowl. Same thing here. I'm gonna cut it in between the thigh, right in between the thigh and the leg. Save the meat for later. Watch your fingers. I'm going really fast, so I've done this, 5,000 times. So I would say if it's your first time, you're gonna go a lot slower than I am. Whack that thigh, throw it in the pot. There's a lot of wounding that happens when giving birth. The placenta detaches from the uterus. And when it does that, it leaves a wound on the inside of the uterus the size of a dinner plate. And that wound bleeds for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. That's why postpartum moms bleed. However, I find that the moms that I feed the bone broth every day, postpartum, they tend to not bleed for very long, like just a couple weeks and their bleeding is done. And I feel like part of the reason is because the bone broth really helps that wound on the inside of their uterus to heal. All of the collagen, the glycine, the proline, the amino acids, all of those nutrients are helping her to rejuvenate, heal, recover, the tissue repair. It is truly a postpartum superfood. So I'm just going around and kind of cutting off the skin. If you like the skin, you can keep the skin and throw it in. It will add a lot of fat, a big thick layer of fat to your broth. So you can throw the skin in there. But I don't really like the texture of the animal fat, the broth fat in the soup too much. So, but if you don't mind it, it's really good to consume the chicken fat. And it tastes really good because of all those spices I use. Okay, so now all I'm doing is I'm cutting down the rib cage and the back. Okay. So this is the breast and this is the rib cage. And it's pretty easy to cut through the ribs straight down because they're a little bit thinner bones. And then you can just sort of find that joint and cut through. So what you have here is you have the rib cage, and then I'm gonna actually whack the rib cage in the back and the wing. This is just kind of help it kind of release all the good stuff from the bone marrow. Now all we have is the breastbone and the breast meat. We are going to just cut the breast meat off. Again, it's okay if there's a little bit of meat on the bone. And, okay, so now we have deboned chicken meat here. We can use for our chicken noodle soup. You have your skin, and then we have our bones and our joints and our ligaments. If I'm not ready to make broth, I can just throw this in a freezer and in a bag, and then whenever I'm ready to make broth, I can just pull it out and toss it in the pot. Now that the 100 minutes is up and we've released our steam, we can open up the lid. And this is the most important part of broth making, and this is what my mother-in-law taught me. And what we do is we can see that a lot of the vegetables, you can see that they're still intact. The carrots and the celery, everything is still sort of holding its shape. So what you want to do is you want to take a potato masher and you want to mash everything up until it's very soft, so it should mash really, really easily, until you kind of almost have it broken down into little tiny pieces. And even the chicken. So the chicken is so soft and the bones have almost disintegrated. You will see here that when you do this, what you're doing is you're releasing all the flavor. And we're gonna run the pressure cooker again on it for another 30 to 40 minutes. And then that's what's gonna really enhance the flavor of your broth. Okay, so you can see, do you see how the chicken, the chicken's gotten pretty good and mushed up, and the carrots are all mushy and the onions. So now we can close it back up. We're gonna put it on pressure cook, and we're gonna go down to 30 minutes this time. And then the keep warm function is really nice. Let's say you do your first 100 minutes before bed, and if you keep it on keep warm, it'll just stay warm all night long. And when you wake up in the morning, then you can release the pressure and you can mash and then close it and put it for the last 30, 40 minute round. Okay, so this one's ready. Now I'm gonna show you how to mash up the one on the stovetop. Okay, let's see how our stovetop broth is doing. All right, so I left this overnight, and as you can see in the morning, it has reduced quite a bit. The water line was up to about here. So we will add more water, and you can see the vegetables and the chicken feet are still pretty much intact. This is where we're gonna go ahead and mush it up. Now the femur bones, the beef femur bones, they're not gonna disintegrate the way the chicken bones did. That's why we added the apple cider vinegar, to help draw out those minerals. And you're gonna wanna do this mashing thing every, 4 or 5 hours, because the stovetop one's gonna be cooking for 24 to 48 hours. So every now and then, just open the lid, check the water level, give it a little mashing. Okay, so here's our femur bones. You can see the marrow has fallen out into the broth. There's some chicken feet. So everything's starting to break down, but I am gonna add a little more water. Because it does tend to evaporate a lot more with this method than the pressure cooker method. And then we'll just kind of get it to boil again and simmer and turn it back down to a very low simmer for, I've got about another 12 more hours. Okay, the very last step is straining the broth. So with the Instant Pot, after the second cycle is done, the pressure is released, then let this cool a little bit, because we're gonna remove this from the pot. If you use the stovetop method, you've let your bones and your vegetables and spices boil for 24 hours and it's ready to strain. The process for straining the broth is the same. So we're gonna take this out, be very, very careful because it may be hot. And we're gonna go over to the sink. Then we're gonna put our bowl and our strainer in the sink, and we have our potato masher. So now we're gonna pour the broth into the bowl using the strainer. This is where you take your masher and you're gonna push it through the strainer, and it's pretty dry. So you can see as it's dripping down, all of that liquid that you're squeezing out from the pulp is extracting all the flavor. So you can just keep squeezing and pressing until it's pretty dry. Now you have about 12 cups in this pot, and this is where you want to add your salt. So for 12 cups, I usually put about a tablespoon, and I always use Celtic sea salt because Celtic sea salt is full of other minerals besides iodine. So it has 87 trace minerals, and all of those minerals are really good for helping mothers to heal after birth. And this is a very natural source of minerals, so I try to have my moms get as many nutrients from a direct natural food source as possible. So then after I stir the salt into the broth, this is where I take it over to a bowl. And I still have more straining to do, and I like to strain my broth into this giant measuring cup. Okay, after straining is the final step, pouring it into the containers. It's cooled down to room temperature, and I have a little plate underneath this just in case I don't lose any drops of my broth. So I'm going to dip my measuring cup in, and I'm going to fill the mason jar. So one batch is about 5 or 6 mason jars, and one mason jar is 32 ounces. This one I'm going to put in the fridge, so I'm going to fill it up a little bit more. And most of the recipes I use in my protocol for feeding mothers after birth, all the soups and stews, are actually 8 cups instead of 4 cups. So 2 of these mason jars would make 1 big batch of soup or stew in my recipes. The other method for storing your broth is silicone bags. These bags are great in the freezer because they don't break, they don't leak, and they're easy to defrost. So you want to make sure that you get the silicone bags that open on the bottom and can sort of stand up on the counter when you're pouring the broth in. I'll show you how I do that. And then these little sealing strips, they just slide right on. And then they're great. You can literally just toss it into your freezer. So that is how you store your broth in the freezer. And what I recommend, I always make 2 batches of chicken and 2 batches of beef. I do the Ayurvedic curry and the classic American, and I store that in my postpartum mother's freezer, and that will last her for probably 2 months, and that'll keep her healthy and strong and rejuvenated. And if she's breastfeeding, it'll help her breast milk to be high quality, high quantity. And this is probably the most important thing that you could do for a postpartum mother to help her recover from birth. Thank you for watching my bone broth tutorial. I really hope it was helpful for you. If you would like more recipes and tips on how to support and cook for a new mother or even a pregnant mother, be sure to check out my website, newmothercaregiving.com, or you can find me on Instagram at newmothercaregiving. Thank you.